Can I bring I wanted to we can go back to Titus. I just want to I like what you said. The Old Testament is kind of symbolic of what happens in the New. Is that what you said?
Right. They're like,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I was looking and I popped around First Corinthians 10 and it says, "For I do not want to be unaware, brothers, that all our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea, and all the same spiritual food and all the drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with the most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness." Now, as I read this, it says we're baptized into Moses. I just had because I don't think they were baptism going. I don't think when the Red Sea parted, I don't think the water drenched them. They were baptized into Moses. What you think baptism in a sense could be? Well, baptized into Moses. They're more or less a follower of him.
I think if anything, I think this is a perfect passage right here that I haven't actually, used as part of my argumentation. I think it's a perfect passage that actually completely supports my view. I mean, let's read what it says. It says that this is talking about Old Testament typology, like I was talking about how things in the Old Testament kind of were shadows of how they would be fulfilled in the New Testament. So he's talking about baptism, how they all passed with Moses through the Red Sea and came out on the other side as people essentially on a mission for God. And it says they all ate the same spiritual food. They all drank the same spiritual drink. They all drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. And so these people were all, without even knowing it, because this was before the incarnation of Christ, they were all taking part in Christ without even knowing it. But he's saying, but this serves as a warning, because even though these people were in Christ and feeding off of Christ, these people still had the capability to wander. He says, but although they were all taking part in Christ without even knowing it, but with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. They had to be punished. He says, now these things serve as our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. He's saying that those who are in Christ, as the Hebrews were without even knowing it, those people can still, people who have been baptized as the Hebrews were in a shadow of true baptism, which would come later. They were all baptized coming through the Red Sea with Moses, and then they partook of Christ. He's saying, although people are baptized and are now partaking of Christ, those people can still lust after evil and then become lost, and they can lose their part in Christ. So this is actually supporting my view that once you're baptized and you begin to take part in Christ, you can actually lose that, and how the idea that people are baptized and then start to act like Christians shouldn't act, that doesn't undercut the effectiveness of baptism.
But are they talking about water baptism?
Yes.
Because because the sea wasn't, they weren't baptized.
Right, that's why
baptism means dipped and immersed in water. They weren't dipped and immersed in water.
But I'm saying that's what I'm saying. It's a shadow of something that will be fulfilled later. Paul is saying that what they did when they passed through the Red Sea was a baptism, and then they were taking part in Christ on the other side of that baptism. It's a metaphor. It's a shadow of what will be fulfilled later by us being baptized and then taking part in Christ. He's saying the Israelites were baptized through their passing through the Red Sea and then began to partake in Christ in a shadow of a way to how we truly are baptized and then take part in Christ. And then he says, but that doesn't mean that these people can't lust after sin. That doesn't mean that these people who are baptized and are now taking part in Christ can't fall away. He said, that's why he says, nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. So those who were baptized and were now taking part in Christ still were able to sin and tempt Christ, and then Christ withdrew himself from them and destroyed them by serpents. Nor complain as some of those others complained, and then they were destroyed by the destroyer. Now all these things happened as examples, and they were written for our admonition. And then he says, and then he makes it exceedingly clear that these Christians, these people who have been baptized into Christ and are now partaking in Christ, that it is possible for them to fall in the same way. It is possible for them to lose their salvation, their part in Christ, in the same way. He says, therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. Those of you who think
that you stand firm, that you cannot lose this thing that you've been given, this gift that you've been given. Those of you who think that you can't lose it, take heed lest ye fall, because it is possible. Just as the Israelites, after they were baptized and began to take part in Christ, they were still able to fall into sin and tempt Christ, and then they were destroyed. Take heed, because that can happen to us too. All these things have happened as examples to us. So actually, this verse perfectly supports my view that people can be regenerated and take part in Christ after their baptism and then fall away.